Hello everyone and welcome to my review of Legacy of Persia for CK3, the third and final DLC of the second chapter. This flavor pack takes us to Iran to deal with the anarchy gripping the Abbasid Empire, allowing various Persian lords to prosper and rise in the ensuing chaos. As the future of CK3 and its direction remain an ever-growing debate, I hope this video helps to look at the new features through that light. We shall begin by looking at the paid DLC content and then moving on to the free features that came with the accompanying update. With that all being said, let's take a look at the Legacy of Persia. The Iranian Intermezzo. A returning feature from the struggle of Iberia is the Iranian Intermezzo, a regional conflict covering the independent ambitions of the lords of Iran as the Abbasid Caliphate struggles to find stability. Mechanically, the Intermezzo has three phases: unrest, stabilization, and concession. The phases aim to reflect what the overall attitude of the Iranian region is towards the hegemony of the Caliphate over Iran, be it the loyalists who seek to retain peace within the empire, or the detractors who seek to destroy or otherwise overthrow the authority so they can carve out their own independence. My initial reaction to another struggle mechanic being added to game was at first one of apprehension. Previously, I felt like the struggle for Iberia mechanic had a lot of gatekeeping of certain ways of playing, locking some options behind different phases that were hard to moderate if the AI felt like they wanted to do something else. For example, you cannot form the Empire of Hispania without finishing the struggle first, which means that, let's say, characters with a good martial focus may just be locked behind the outcome of the struggle to achieve their own ambition. Thankfully, the Iranian Intermezzo seems to be an overall improvement with all the things from Struggle for Iberia, with little content being locked out in the first place, meaning your desire to interact with its systems remains very much so up to you. Want to form the Empire of Persia? Go right ahead. Additionally, the slow progress of the Iberian catalysts being at the hands of the AI is less of an issue, because now here, instead of there being three phases and you never know where you're going to go, there are now just two core phases that the struggle will flip between: unrest and stabilization, meaning that whatever goal you desire, requiring it to be in either one, you will eventually get there because flipping between the two is a certainty. The third phase of the concession works here more as a neglected resolution, so should the Caliphate not exist or the Intermezzo mechanic is simply being unused, it will naturally come to an end, meaning this system is really nicely adapted for players who simply don't want to interact with it. If nobody uses the Iranian Intermezzo, it will simply resolve itself. So if you want to work your way up towards merging Iran to the Caliphate, or you want to work on your ambitions of breaking away, I think this is actually a relatively good mechanic. It's just such an improvement over the previous one that it's hard to find negatives about something that's just seen so much good work done to it. Iranian cultural content. To improve the uniqueness of playing in Iran, new traditions, men-at-arms and portrait items have been added to the game. The outfits in question are certainly unique, with helmets with grand adornments and beards that truly fit the setting. The new men-at-arms are a nice addition too, with the Tarkhan Heavy Cavalry being a very strong unit in the 867 start, as well as the Asawira and Tawashi, assuming I've said them right, all having good art and place with very equine focused additions. I think returning players will be happy to see some new flavour added to this particular region to try and tear it apart from all the other regions, but when it comes to combat, with the addition of new men-at-arms, I feel like there's not too much that can be done to really shake up the system. That is to say, adding in new men-at-arms is really just adding in a new cover of paint and doesn't change too much. So if you like the new look, that's good, but don't expect any dramatic changes. A good chunk of new cultural traditions have been added to the region, and its many cultures within it. To name a few, Irrigation Experts allows for more buffs towards desert building and buildings with a nice flavour towards the gardening. Fierce Independence, while not an overtly positive trait, will allow cultures with it to remain dogged in their preservation, with buffs to resist conversion and assimilation. The last tradition I'll mention is my personal favourite, Beacon of Learning, a huge buff towards creating and fostering learning characters, their tutelage, and even their perk gaining in later life. Overall, I think this is the core of what defines the DLC and its focus on Iran compared to all the other regions. To my mind, While all the changes are good, and I do think they're all good, I do wonder how much pull they're going to have in the mid to late game, which could render the systems becoming akin to any other region. I mean, for example, it's not like there are any late game innovations they've added, traditions that you unlock by going on grand conquests or anything. What you get in 867 is what you get for the rest of the game. So if you find yourself becoming bored with it early on, then by the mid to late game, it's going to be like kind of any other campaign. Court Scholars and Master Assassins. The Beacon of Learning tradition I just mentioned also had an additional bonus, unlocking the Court Scholar, one of 2 new court positions added to the game. The Court Scholar, dependent on aptitude, will give you a buff towards cultural fascination progress and free learning stats. So, if you're cultural head, this is free advancement towards the next era. With this comes new events relating to your Court Scholar, allowing them to become inspired to create alchemical or academic materials. Oftentimes, I think it's the smaller parts of CK3 that turn out to be some of the more interesting, and this strikes me as one that has some really good potential for unique play. As you work through the eras, you've got a character that's alongside you, always trying to make sure that you're the cutting edge of technological society. So yeah, I really think they hit the nail on the head. The other major court position added was the Master Assassin, available for faiths with the Fedayeen tenet such as Azrakism. While not as fleshed out as the Court Scholar, it does add buffs towards hostile scheme power and stopping enemy hostile schemes, so a nice roleplay character to add to the game, but perhaps lacks the ambition we might hope to see one day from some kind of organizations type DLC, where there's a guild of assassins, and you can hire them to do your murder schemes for you, because as it stands right now, murder schemes are kind of locked behind people with good intrigue, and if I've got the gold, I feel like the Guild of Assassins could do the job for me. Dynasty Legacy. Brilliance. With the new CK3 DLC has come a new Dynasty Legacy, and what was a nice additional change was the redesign to the Dynasty menu itself to accommodate the ever-increasing amount of legacies, and overall just neaten everything up. As for the new legacy tree itself, we see Brilliance aiming to reflect the historical magnificence of the Persia of old. Mechanically, however, there are no new outstandingly unique sections of the tree. It does have buffs centrally relevant to things regarding the DLC, like the new men-at-arms we discussed, the court positions, and free features that have come, such as tax collectors. But if you're looking for breaking new mechanics within the Dynasty section, you're not going to find it here. I can't believe they didn't add baking mechanics. What an outrage. House Unity. With that now covering the paid DLC content, we now move over to the free stuff, and in truth, this is where I find a surprising amount of really good content. The House Unity mechanic adds an entirely new layer of depth to your family and how it interacts with you as a character within that family. Now clans will have internal stability within their house, shifting between antagonistic and harmonious. This isn't just a series of weak buffs either. The unity of your house will actually determine the succession upon your death between high partition with the lion's share going to one guy versus complete chaos and everybody demanding basically everything. I'm genuinely surprised to see the amount of interactions added to the clan system with House Unity, including decisions relevant to promoting House Unity and listening to different members of the house, and minor actions between family members also being important, such as offering guardianship to promote unity, or blackmailing each other to maybe cause up some antagonistic behaviour. Overall, this is just a straight up excellent change, and a great step forward in defining the clan governments as being different to feudal and tribal. I just don't have any complaints. Tax Collector. A new mechanic for collecting taxes from your vassals has been added to the game for all clan governments in the form of the Tax Collector. Simply put, this is a special court position with its own dedicated menu where each tax collector can be assigned to collect money from its assigned vassals. In doing so, they come with additional tax laws they can use, which overall makes the system of economics in CK3 a touch more expanded. While my personal experience with this system has mostly been flavourful, I can imagine over time that as people use it more, it can be used to create much more fleshed out and crafted realms, with different duchies and vassals having specific tax governance for what is relevant to their situation. My total reaction though is, while this feature is small and not overly impactful to the game, I'm mostly surprised by how it's free content. I'm not complaining, of course, I'm just surprised that this came as part of the free feature. I wonder if this is a mechanic they're planning to use later on in future DLCs, and for that reason wanted to keep it open. Viziers. Speaking of features returning from prior DLCs, we have the Viziers being added to the game, that add on to the regency system we saw introduced with Wards and Wardens. The Vizier here acts as a chosen advisor to the crown, specifically on matters of stewardship and tax collection, meaning if you want a good boost to income, the Vizier could be your guy. The drawback is a well-positioned Vizier could be near impossible to remove without more dangerous murder. You're going to have to murder him, so that choice will remain up to you. To parrot what I said earlier, this feature comes across as surprisingly good to just be given away as free content, as it beefs up all clan governments across the map. So that means if you're playing in Iberia, with all of the Fate of Iberia content, you now have access to the Viziers that you can play in Spain. Special buildings. Falling back to the Iranian region, a collection of new buildings have been added, which are all really thematic. Interestingly, natural wonders find themselves being more prominently represented, with mountains and lakes being special buildings, as well as minor historical buildings now covering Persia, retelling the history of the region in architecture. My personal favourite additions are Alamut Castle, nestled on a mountaintop, and the Great Wall of Gorgon, which, while not being massively powerful, had such great presence on the map that it actually inspired me to really want to play there and act as like a march on the border to the north. I hope Paradox continues to add buildings like this that make individual counties feel like core components of the wider geography of the world. So, that wraps up the major features for the Legacy of Persia. There are some additional bonuses that didn't get mentioned, such as the relevant new bookmark, the concept of secret religions, and also the changes towards the Holy Roman Empire that, while being nice, aren't necessarily big enough to warrant a whole section explaining them. So, how good is this DLC then in comparison to its two fellow flavor packs, as well as the game as a whole? Well, I think this DLC is simply a stronger Fate of Iberia, the intermezzo taking what worked with the struggle for Iberia and fixing and otherwise speeding up things that didn't really work too well or felt a bit slow, and to me feels like a much better flow of overall gameplay. That being said, the other aspects of the DLC, specifically relating to managing the unique cultural experience of playing in Persia, feel a little weak to me personally, as the content is very localised around the 867 start and doesn't have much to work towards after the first 100 years of gameplay. In many ways, the Legacy of Persia is more about the journey of rising alongside or against the Caliphate of the Abbasids, but never really exploring the potential of Persia beyond that. It almost feels like there should be some long-term goals, such as crushing the Byzantines and restoring the ambition of Darius the Great, but sadly there isn't really too much to show there. In some ways it's kind of surprising that they actually added in a new court scholar position with the DLC, but not actually any technologies for said court scholar to research towards. It's all the generic researches, which I don't know, can come across as a missed opportunity. In great contrast, however, the free content with clan reworks and Viziers actually create really long-standing content across the map, a positive approach by Paradox to not lock themselves out of features that they may want to reuse later on down the line. This then makes reviewing this DLC rather difficult, because my position stands that the paid content of Legacy of Persia is a little weak in content for its price tag. That being said though, if I am to count the additional free content as part of the DLC, I guess I'd say it's a relatively decent DLC. Whether or not you think it's fair to add in the free content as part of the review of the DLC is up to you, but I would say that when we're looking at the release window for Legacy of Persia, it's kind of good to keep in mind that when you're paying for Legacy of Persia, you're paying for the continuation of content for CK3 as a whole, and for that reason, I kind of packaged the free update and the DLC together in my mind as one large block. Legacy of Persia then wraps up being a decent flavour pack, adding a lot more improvements in comparison to its predecessor flavour packs, having the best building map art yet, and being generous in its quality of free content, while also, equally, sounding the alarm that its mechanical content has finite depth beyond the first century of game time and offering no promises of future content, which may be disappointing to players who are not interested in playing in that initial start date of 867. But you do get Cool Hat in this DLC, and you know, the Cool Hat is a huge selling point. Alright, those are my thoughts on the DLC. Feel free to tell me what you think down below. If you liked the video, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!